before we can dismantle some common misconceptions about the death penalty, we have to understand what it is. So what is the death penalty? Well, the death penalty, it's also known as capital punishment, is state-sanctioned homicide as a punishment for a crime. And the death penalty is currently legal in 25 of the US states. And although lethal injection is the primary method of execution, other forms include electrocution, lethal gassing, and hanging.
So now that we understand what the death penalty is, we can now explain some common misconceptions about it. The first common misconception is that the death penalty reduces crime. In a 2009 survey, 88% of criminologists surveyed believed that the death penalty was not a deterrent to murder. In 2016, the FBI Uniform Crime Report showed that the South had the highest murder rate of any US region, while the Northeast had the lowest rate. This is significant because the South accounts for over 80% of all executions, while the Northeast only 1%. Again, reaffirming that the death penalty does not deter homicides, and rather that states without the death penalty have had consistently lower murder rates over time. Evidently, the death penalty does not deter crime.
Great point. And now for our second misconception is that DNA evidence prevents innocent people from getting executed. However, according to the Death Penalty Information Center, for every 9 prisoners executed, 1 innocent person was condemned to die and later exonerated. Even more shocking, since 1973, more than 180 people have been released from death row with evidence of their innocence, proving that innocent people are still at risk for being executed because of the death penalty sentence. And that shows how dangerous it is.
Not only is the death penalty dangerous because it and many times kills innocent people, another misconception is that the death penalty is cheaper than a life sentence. Although this might be a compelling argument in support of the death penalty, it's ultimately untrue. According to a 2017 research study, Oklahoma capital cases cost on average 3.2 times more than non-capital cases. Defense costs for death penalty trials in Kansas averaged about $400,000 per case, compared to $100,000 per case when the death penalty was not sought. Enforcing the death penalty cost Florida $51 million a year, above what it would cost to punish all first-degree murderers with life in prison without parole. Based on the 44 executions Florida had carried out since 1976, this amounts to a cost of $24 million each for each execution. This evidence proves time and time again that the death penalty is not in fact cheaper than a life sentence at all.
So the death penalty isn't cheaper, and there is some possibility for mistakes in terms of innocence. But I guess we use the death penalty because it's popular and other countries use it, so that's why we should enforce it. That is untrue. The death penalty is not that popular, and it is not utilized successfully around the world. In reality, only 53 countries use the death penalty as a legal form of capital punishment, and it's used rarely. Only a few countries like Saudi Arabia, Iraq, and Iran use the death penalty commonly, as more and more governments have moved away from this harsh form of punishment. In fact, more than 70% of the world's countries have fully abolished the usage of the death penalty, and so more and more countries are heading towards that direction in the future.
Not only is the death penalty not popular, but it's also racially unjust and targets very specific groups of people. So a common misconception about the death penalty is that, well, it targets all groups of people, regardless of race, class, or ability. But when you look at the statistics of those who are currently on death row and about those who have been executed, it is clear that the death penalty targets BIPOC, low income, and mentally ill people the most. Specifically, 75% of cases involve the murder of white victims, even though the murder rate between white and Black people is equivalent. Similarly, 35% of people executed since 1976 have been Black, despite only constituting 12% of the population. Not only does the death penalty have many downfalls financially and morally, but it's also racially motivated and continues to prioritize a white narrative in the United States.
So when we consider all of these facts about the death penalty, it's really concerning that we're still doing it as of 2021. These are some of the planned executions for the first half of this year. As you can see, some of them have already been executed. And given what Dariana just said about people of color being more likely to be given the death penalty, it's very concerning. So as you can see, it says executed, which means that it was done. There's also reprieved and stayed, which means that their dates have either been moved or canceled, but more likely have just been prolonged. So it's really concerning that we're still using the death penalty even in 2021.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think that that execution doc just shows the importance of being educated about this topic and also trying to fight for reform, not only within the United States, but maybe within your own local states, to making sure that this is something that we continue to monitor and think about. So thank you so much for listening. And we're open to any questions or discussion points that you'd like to discuss about the death penalty and its implications.
If we don't have any questions, I think that we are done then. If you do have any questions, we'll stay around for a few more minutes and address them in the chat.
I also think that Ashley might be sending out an evaluation form. Um,
Awesome.
if you could send that in the chat just so that we could see how you're feeling about these misconceptions and what other misconception you'd like us to present next.
It looks like there's a question from Hannah that says, do you think that the death penalty deters crime at all? Dariana, I'll pass this to you because you addressed this.
Well, I think that when you look at it on a major scale and like the trends of it, it evidently doesn't, because the South is the state with like, or is the area with the most concentrated places where the death penalty exists, but the murder rates are still significantly higher than that of the Northeast. So I think like you can see the trends over time that when the death penalty is instituted, crime isn't reduced. So no, I don't think it's fair to say that the death penalty deters crime. And even let's say it deterred crime in one instance in one county in 1 year, when you look at that trend over time, it's not significant enough to like change the fact that it does not reduce crime. But excellent question.